Hey guys, welcome back to another Star Citizen Leak Mini. 3.13.1 is going through the paces in order to become the big celebration everyone is expecting. The anticipated Tank and Hercules have finally made their playable appearances to seemingly universal acclaim, as long as you aren't a fan of kitchens. Ships even larger, such as the Bengal and Javelin, have also popped up for the first time, giving people hope that these hunk of JPEG may actually one day become flyable. Down on the surface, our previous report on the RSI fighter was all but confirmed, though the Star Bomber is absent. We did say this was one of the uncertain appearances. 3.13.1's Fleetweek is coming along quite nicely. Would be a shame if something were to happen during it. Today's episode will be on the upcoming in-game dynamic event, the Ninetails Lockdown, and will serve as a follow-up to our initial reporting on the event in the episode Locking Down the 400i. The Ninetail Lockdown has appeared as a possible in-game event since 3.12's initial launch. Entering the files around this time there was a decent amount of information to cover, but at that point in time it was still very early. In today's iteration, the event plays out very similarly, with added bells and whistles that make the event a much deeper experience than we had initially thought. Rather than compare and contrast with our earlier reporting on the event, we're going to go over it in its entirety again, as there have been that many changes. The Ninetails Lockdown begins with a comms call from Crusader Security, which we've posted in an earlier video linked on the top right. The call can be summed up as Crusader Security warning that a Lagrange Point station has been blockaded, preventing direct quantum travel, as well as being patrolled by hostile forces in a large variety of pirate vessels. To best sum up the event, we'll be describing it in two separate phases, an inactive phase and an active phase. The inactive phase is where we'll begin. From there are two activities, cargo running and fleet finding. The first is the primary draw to the station that's non-combat related. When a station becomes blockaded, the value of certain goods go up, as well as the sellable value in their specific location. This being one of the reasons the new price monitor page was added to the Mobiglass recently. The materials a station raises their prices on can either be taken advantage of outside or inside of the mission Crusader Security gives the player. An example of this being the medical supplies mission set up for blockaded stations directly requesting goods, whilst there may exist indirect requests for goods simply hinted at through price spikes on the Mobiglass. In order to bring in these goods, a player needs to ensure they dodge the Ninetails surrounding the station, or alternatively, in one of the first uses outside of the mission restrictions, the Ninetails may let the player through the blockade depending on their standing reputation with the pirate faction. We'll talk a bit more on the implications of this a little later when we get further into the lockdown, but for now we'll move on to the second half of the two activities, fleet finding. Fleet finding is the catalyst for kicking off the active phase of the lockdown. A player is tasked alongside a number of Crusader security vessels to scan for the Ninetails fleet formation, which contains the quantum dampening ship that has locked down the Lagrange point. It's up to Crusader Security and the player alike to protect a number of terrapins before they're shot down by a number of pirates in order to find the fleet to enter the next phase. However, going back to the reputation, CIG listened to the feedback from Xenothreat and have implemented an additional mission. There exists an antagonist version of the Fleet Find mission in which players are tasked to work alongside the Ninetails to take out the terrapins and prevent the lockdown from being lifted. I will note that this mission isn't taken directly from the Ninetails, rather some unknown pirate faction that hired you as a criminal to stir some chaos, meaning that if your reputation with the Ninetails isn't high enough, they're going to be shooting at you as well as Crusader and the opposing players. Eventually, when the Crusader security-backed forces do inevitably locate the fleet, the event moves into the active phase. This is where time finally becomes a factor in determining the outcome of the event, as Crusader security, backed by players, are given about 20 minutes to take down the Ninetails flagship along with key portions of their quantum blockade. No matter what happens within this time, the event ends with this final battle. There's not really much else to say in regards to it other than the fact that it's just another big battle topping off a dynamic event mission chain like Xenothreat. This event does facilitate PvP towards the end here as well, but as of now there is no official counter mission for the end battle, only the bits we talked about earlier. If the timer runs out without Ninetails being wiped out, then they will be named the victors for successfully retreating, potentially shortening the time in-game to their next lockdown. If they're wiped out successfully within the time limit, then Crusader security and supporting players will be called victorious. Now finished with the lockdown's events, we're going to go over some of the details that surround it. For instance, the lockdown is limited only to Lagrange points throughout the system, rather than them coming to any sort of station in close orbit to a planet like Olisar. Through doing lockdown missions, you can level up a separate reputation chain for Crusader security that, like any reputation chain, gives you better rewards while also giving you more favourable dialogue with the mission givers and pilots at the lockdown stations. As of now, the Ninetails lockdown will likely not coincide with Fleet Week. Whilst Evocati have begun testing it through their hyper-secret strike teams, it has yet to trickle anywhere else. It's much safer to assume that it's a 3.14 edition rather than for 3.13.1, despite the massive inclusion of new content relating to it. According to sources familiar with the event's creation and plans for its future, future, the event will not be a one-time thing similar to Xenothreat, rather an evolving new mission type that becomes available periodically throughout the year. It's currently unknown what timing this may take in terms of both how long the event will be up for as well as how long in between each active use of it, but the word currently thrown around is quarterly. And that's all we have to cover for today's episode. Hopefully with the introduction of a PvP mission, all players can participate with fewer complaints. Comment below whether or not you plan on helping the stations get back on their feet, or that you'd rather lock them up tighter, and I'll see you around.
I'd like to give a thank you to our Patreons, especially our Leaky Pipe producers, such as Eric Schulten, One for All, Golf Mike, Bahamut, Man Meat, Snarky Not Live, Faydog74, Unctum, Archie, Dirk Mervis, Capt D Spawn, Josh Howman, Yannick Cumley, Boobbot, Regula Tim, Sorston, Professor Mango, Master Seif, KP Shizzle, Ryan A. Quinton, and Rabbit Crabs. Thanks for watching.